How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
At the bottom of this hour, at 35 after the hour, I am going to interview Brett Buchanan, one of the very top pollsters in the United States, across the aisle, highly respected by Democrats and Republicans alike. Because, you know, I've been talking to you about polling for a while and how I view it and pollsters view it, and I think you're actually talking to probably the best pollster in the American Western Hemisphere. Probably is worth doing. There are some great pollsters out there, Chris Wilson, Brett Buchanan, and others. Brett's right up there at the top. He was the pollster for Brian Kemp in Georgia in 2022, among others. And it's just, I think it's time to talk to one of the experts and pick his brain on polling so you guys can hear what you should and shouldn't take from it. Now, I want to read you an email. I have some of the best listeners, and one just sent me this email from, this is why I'm reading this for you, from Tehran. I have a friend who is there right now and sent me this note. The report here in Tehran is it's an accident and not a conspiracy. To the extent there are conspiracy theories circulating, they're all domestic. The Majlis have been trying to find a way to oust the president of Iran for a while. Even Khamenei had turned against him. The rest of the leadership didn't like him. He and his foreign minister were horribly disliked and ridiculed because of their lack of education, their low-class status, etc. They're also blaming him and his administration for the out-of-control inflation. He was by far the least popular president Iran has had. The only thing is that the Bajik is out and about making sure people aren't celebrating his death. That's the Iranian secret police. They're concerned about possible unrest due to celebrations. For hours after he went missing, reporters were out there showing how poor the visibility was. Some were comparing it to the Kobe Bryant accident, which even here in Iran is well known. They were warning about the weather visibility conditions, but chose to still fly. Now, keep in mind, I'm in a high-end neighborhood and a gated community with 24-hour guards, so all is quiet. There's no need to worry. If there were any celebrations, rallies, or protests, it wouldn't be in this area, so I'm not really worried about it. Now, additionally, there are reports that suggest that the Iranian president internally in media broadcasts was to blame for the incident himself. That the Iranian president himself probably forced the landing, that the pilots themselves warned that conditions were not good enough for flight due to heavy fog, but being the zealot that he was, insisted he had to be there with his foreign minister, and himself probably cost the lives of himself and his crew. So that's happening out of Iran. That is a correspondent who is in Tehran visiting family right now, saying that there really aren't conspiracy theories there. To the extent that there are, however, they're all domestic conspiracy theories because the regime had turned against the guy due to all the economic problems. Now, I want to switch gears dramatically. I've been meaning to talk about something, and today is finally the day because something piqued my interest the other day. The other day was some sort of yet another religious holiday for the Alphabet Gang. We have so many of them. I mean, for Christians, we celebrate Easter and we celebrate Christmas. And if you're inside the church, you might celebrate Epiphany, and Pentecost, of course, was the Sunday. But for the Alphabet Gang, the whole world has to celebrate. An entire month in June will be devoted to corporations across the world changing their logos to be rainbow colored. We've got to celebrate Trans Awareness Day and National Coming Out Day and National Coming Out Week and Black Pride Month, which is different from Pride Month, and all of the other sexual celebrations of the religious left. The other day was International Transphobia or some such day. And the General Secretary of NATO felt the need to tweet his virtue and stand in solidarity with the oppressed trans folk of the world. And I looked at that tweet and I replied, said, I think the elite have missed the plot because there are millions of people, not just in the United States, but in Europe as well, who vehemently disagree with the trans agenda. There's a growing backlash in European countries, in Great Britain, in Sweden, in France, in Germany. And those people are not just voting, but they're winning elections. So when the Secretary General of NATO tweets in support of trans rights, a lot of people decide, well, NATO's lost the point. They're not a security organization to keep the West safe from communists. They're now a social agenda organization for the left. And it makes it easier for people on the right who are suspicious of NATO to undermine the credibility of NATO. I think about that, and then I think about corporations. You know what's going to happen? June 1st is going to come around, and every corporation in the world is going to declare itself gay. General Motors, Coca-Cola, maybe not Anheuser-Busch after the blowback over what's his name, but most corporations in America, they're going to declare themselves gay. They're going to hoist a rainbow flag out front, and on social media, they're going to change their logos to be shades of the rainbow. I remember 2 years ago, Paramount updated its app on my Apple TV. And the only change was for the month of June to change the logo to a rainbow. That was it. That was the only app update. Deleted the app for the month. I thought, listen, I don't care. If you want Pride Month during my birthday month, that's fine with me. But it's not something I celebrate. And you're going to force this on me and do this sort of thing. I don't need to be a part of it. I'm totally fine if you think you need an entire month to celebrate your sexuality. But I don't get a month to celebrate mine, and I see no need, and you live and let live. But really, you felt the need to push out an app update to all you were doing was changing the icon to a rainbow. It's very bizarre. And you may not like it. I get it. You may not like my position. But I'm one of the reasonable ones who takes the live and let live proposition. There are a lot who have become extremely angry and aggressive in their opposition to the cultural institutions and the elite of this country shoving Pride Month down their throat. And I increasingly just find it infuriating that for the month of June, every corporation gets to pretend. They don't really care about the issue, but they virtue signal. What's going on here is corporations and the elite have lost the plot. There are a vast number of people who disagree with the left's agenda. And corporations and governments and NGOs, non-governmental organizations, pushing the left's sexual agenda and the left's cultural positions onto everyone means there are a lot of people who don't have goodwill for them anymore. And you're starting to see this shake up. For example, people on the right who no longer support the free market. We've had these conversations here. I gave a speech in Rhode Island, in Newport, Rhode Island, to a group on Saturday night in defense of the free market. And the thing that comes up every time that defense of the free market comes up is, well, why are you supporting the free market? Look at the corporations of America pushing cultural leftist positions. Take Harry's Razors. Harry's Razors pushes the trans agenda, the alphabet gang agenda. Harry's Razors used to be an advertiser of mine and dropped me as an advertiser because I'm a conservative. They dropped Ben Shapiro because Ben Shapiro is a conservative. And what is the result of this? They push a cultural left agenda. They have embraced cultural leftism. Harry's Razors has even done ads with a trans man, who clearly a woman, but who grew facial hair thanks to the hormones she's on, shaving. And now you've got the Daily Wire coming up with their own razor blade proposition. I don't want my razor blades to be for or against the trans agenda. I don't want my razor blades to be woke or anti-woke or conservative. I just want a good razor blade. But the fact that corporations and governmental entities and nonprofits decide they've got to plant their flag and signal cultural leftism is actually making people on the right decide these people are hostile to us and against us. And so what's happening as these institutions continue to fail, people on the right are willing to burn bridges with them. And you're going to see a whole bunch of corporations and corporate CEOs who actually need people defending the free market who turn their back on the free market. And they're to blame. I love Delta Airlines. I was on Delta this weekend. I have flown Delta so much in the past number of months. I fly Delta. One day I'd love to be able to fly Priority Jet or NetJets or a private carrier. I get recognized so much at airports now, and everybody's very nice. Don't get me wrong, everybody's very nice, but it does get kind of awkward after a while. I don't mind people coming up to me. I had a woman yesterday. I was boarding the flight on the way home from Rhode Island and asked if she could take a picture with me. And I was like, after everybody's in and we're in the air, come up to first class. I'll take a picture with you. I just didn't want to tie up boarding with somebody trying to take a picture of them. It's kind of awkward. I'm totally fine to do that, but one day, private. But till then, on Delta. Delta goes out of its way to make a big deal about celebrating diversity and pride. Delta has been one of the leading corporations in Georgia to fight against the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and that all it does is protect religious people from the government turning against them. It has nothing to do with private corporations. Home Depot does it, Coca-Cola does it, all these major corporations in Georgia. And you're going to find Delta and Coke and Home Depot and others that when you decide to plant your flag with the left-wing cause, people on the right say, you know what, screw that company. It wants assistance when planes are grounded. Why are we giving our taxpayer dollars to help a company that is culturally hostile to our values, that is in your face with the left's values? The left has decided, and they put corporations in this terrible position where you must not just plant your flag, you must parade in the streets for the left-wing cause, or you're not sufficiently loyal. And what that's doing is it's undermining these corporations with people they need on the right to defend free markets. These leftists are communists to begin with, who want the end of the free market. I mean, the left do not want Delta's planes in the sky because of global warming, and yet Delta's willing to alienate the right with social justice causes, and they need the right to be able to continue to fly. More so, frankly, corporations need the right when it comes to tax reform and corporate reform and regulatory control, and there are people on the right willing to burn down corporate America. NATO, an outside non-governmental entity backed by governments of the world, when its Secretary General comes out and plants his flag for left-wing causes that he doesn't even need to say anything on but feels the need to, is telling the right, you know, NATO has moved so far from its position of defending the West. Why are we funding it? We could just do multilateral treaties instead of having this large non-governmental entity. Take the post office as a great example of the U.S. government. My daughter mailed her graduation announcements on April 16th. Philip, who works for me, lives 2 miles from my house. Got his graduation announcement 2 days ago. A friend of mine sent out her wedding invitations 3 months ago. Her wedding is this weekend, this coming weekend. Her wedding is this coming weekend. Sent out wedding announcements 3 months ago, and people are only just getting the wedding announcements. The post office is fundamentally broken. Rome, Georgia, Floyd County, Georgia. The Board of Elections is sending advisories that they've mailed out absentee ballots and people still haven't gotten them. The election's on Tuesday. The primary in Georgia is on Tuesday. Our fundamental institutions are broken, but by God, come June, you know the past Postmaster General of the Post Office are going to be signaling their solidarity with Pride Month. They can't get the basics done, but yet they can signal their virtue for the left. That's going to burn bridges with the right, and in the process of doing it, it's going to undermine these corporations. Speaking up for left-wing causes is a choice. It's what the left demands. They don't have to do this. They're going to be perfectly fine not doing it. Target is pulling back some of its pride displays in stores after local residents in parts of the country complained. the fact that everybody feels the need in corporations and government to stand up for left-wing causes. You don't hear them standing up for any conservative cause. You don't hear them standing up in defense of parental rights. You don't hear them standing up for school choice. None of that stuff. It's always the left-wing causes. And that signals they're on the left, and that makes people on the right who would otherwise have the backs of these corporations and entities say, you know what, screw it. You picked a side. I'm on the opposite side. You can burn. And that undermines everything because the left is now capitalizing on that right-wing antipathy to undermine the free market and undermine governmental institutions and foreign entities we should be allied with. They're taking advantage of these entities being forced to take a left-wing side, and now the left wouldn't pee on them if they're on fire, and now they've got the right doing the same thing. This ends badly for all of us, but it's by design from the left, and you need to be aware of it.
Blinds.com Cyber Monday Last Chance is happening now. Don't miss out on up to 45% off site-wide. A Blinds.com design expert can help you make the perfect selection on your schedule. We can handle everything from measure to your whole home installed for one low cost. With over 25 million windows covered, Blinds.com is the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings. Save up to 45% site-wide, plus a free professional measure right now at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Okay, so we got a problem with the post office, all of us. Actually, I just got an email from a listener who's listening and said they just got Christmas cards in the mail. Some Christmas cards just showed up in the mail. This is actually a serious growing problem when you've got boards of elections sending out absentee ballots and people are getting, I haven't gotten mine. I sent in my absentee ballot request. When was it? On May 6th, I sent in my absentee ballot request, and I have not gotten my absentee ballot request. Hasn't actually showed up. The election is tomorrow, so I got to go show up in person. I wanted to get an absentee ballot. I haven't gotten mine in the mail. This is a problem. My kid, again, sent out her graduation invitations over a month ago. People are just getting them in the mail. People who live within miles of our house are just getting them. And then, of course, that's not the only government. Let me tell you the other one. So I gotta leave here and go to get my TSA pre-check renewed. So my passport expired, and it hasn't come back yet, despite expediting it. And so I can't. I've got global entry. But the geniuses who designed the TSA pre-check system, the global entry number can't roll over to general pre-check. So I got to go through the whole pre-check procedure again for TSA pre-check. Doing it this afternoon. Had to reorder a certified copy of my birth certificate, which thankfully came by UPS, so it showed up on time as opposed to USPS. This whole thing is just government incompetence breaking down. Now, I got to move on. Before I do, I got to tell you, so when I was in Rhode Island Saturday night, I was given a speech, and a lady was there from Americans for Prosperity, and she said, I got to tell you, in Las Vegas, we had a guy show up, and he saw us. We had a big banner. It said Bidenomics, and he said, are y'all Americans for Prosperity? We said, yes. He said, I listened to Eric Erickson here in Las Vegas, listens on the radio out there, and knew who AFP was, got his whole church involved with Americans for Prosperity. So thank you, whoever you are, listener in Las Vegas, Nevada, for listening and being involved with Americans for Prosperity. Right now, they're doing this tour around the country that prosperity is possible. They want to remind you we know the tried and true ideas on how to get the country going again, how to get the economy fired up again. All you have to do is go to prosperityispossible.com, just like this guy did, and find out where the tour is in your area, prosperityispossible.com. They're all over the nation. They're reminding people about the American economy and the great ideas of conservatism that can get the country growing again. Americans for Prosperity. Find out more at prosperityispossible.com. All right, I have a treat for y'all. I talk to you about polling all the time and how to view it, and don't take the bottom line numbers, but pay attention to the trends. And if you're polling the same group of people and the trend shifts over time, well, you may not know the number, but you know the trend. And if all the polls are going in a direction, you can kind of get a sense of it. But I finally decided, you know what, doggone it. Let me talk to an actual expert. And boy, do I have the expert of experts for you. One of the best pollsters in the country is Brent Buchanan. Signal is the company, and they worked for Governor Kemp and other great clients on the right, and he knows polling. So Brent is joining me by phone. Brent, how are you?
Hey, Eric. Good to talk to you.
Okay, so let's start with the basics here. Polling today obviously is different from 30 years ago when everyone had a landline phone, and now you've got online pollsters, which I still remain skeptical of. You got mobile phones, you got landline phones. So how much more difficult is it to do a poll now?
It's definitely more challenging to get somebody to pay attention, notice an invitation to a survey, whether that's by a phone call, a text message, online, like you were talking about, and then get them to actually invest their time in taking it, just because everybody's attention is so fragmented. I mean, I forget the stat, but how many advertisements we all see in a single day. And essentially a request to take a survey, you can consider one of those many advertisements, of which have very little benefit directly to the person taking the survey, unlike advertising where, at least if you buy something, you end up with a product.
And so now this has led to, and I get this on a near daily basis whenever polling comes up, well, you can't believe the polls are all wrong. You are a pollster. How do you respond to that sentiment?
Well, we get lumped in with the public pollsters too often. And those are folks who you see, and I don't have anything against them, these universities or news outlets, but none of them have a profit motive to be correct. And none of them are using polling to drive strategy and messaging. And private pollsters like us, who work directly with campaigns and groups working to impact policy or elections, they're not using a poll just to figure out where something is. They're trying to figure out, how do I conduct a poll so I can change the result of where something is today, since polls are simply snapshots in time.
Okay, so I'm glad you say this, because I remember years ago listening to, and I'm not a huge fan of the guy, but Dick Morris, when Clinton hired him in the late 90s, he gave a talk about polling and how he explained to Bill Clinton that polling, it's inductive, not deductive reasoning, and the job of the pollster is to tell the candidate or politician how to talk about, sell, and move the public in their direction, as opposed to telling the candidate or politician where the public is. And I guess the dichotomy there today would be, it looks like the Biden team is using polling to lead the president in a direction, as opposed to figuring out from the polling how to win.
Well, you would hope that that's the case, because that's definitely the result based on what we see Biden talk about and the incredibly progressive direction that this administration has gone. And I'm not sure how much of that, and maybe this is conspiratorial, but I'm not sure how much of that is that they're looking at polling and saying, we got to do this with this group, as much as, well, we've got the power, the president's not going to stand in the way, let's push everything we ever want, just in case this is our one bite at the apple for a while.
Right. So now when you guys do polling, and just for background, if you didn't know, so I ran campaigns, and I always marveled at the budgeting for polling. The polling we didn't leak it. It wasn't designed for the public, but they were. And you get these massive binders of data back to try to help us with the race, and it was far more expensive than a public opinion poll that maybe the press would do, far more detailed, and really a much more comprehensive than what you may read about in the New York Times Siena poll. Exactly.
I mean, the best polls that exist out there are the ones that you never see, because the purpose of them was not for the public to consume them. And anytime something's put out there, you've got to question why is this out here? Who paid for this? Why did they pay for it? And we get this question sometimes too, because we do a national monthly survey. We do a every other month congressional battleground survey, and we release them publicly, and we pay for them. And nobody else is sponsoring them or funding them, because we want to help shape the discussion. We want people to know, like, here's our take on where folks are on these given issues. But anytime you see a poll, you've got to ask yourself that question: why is this public? And who paid for this, and what are they trying to accomplish with it? Because the bulk of polling that's done is never public.
Right. Okay. So now let's take just the polling that most people have experience with is the horse race polling. The media is trying to get a snapshot of where the race may or may not be. And I tell people all the time, ignore the actual numbers, and just whether you take the polling average or not, just see where trends are in these polls as they kind of interview the same sets of people and things shift. You as a pollster, What do you think people should learn and take away from polling?
How to be a good consumer of it. And the basic tenets of polling, and this will help you be a good consumer of it, is the survey needs to have interviewed people who look like those who are expected to show up to vote. And you can look at voter history to determine what those trends are within, a reasonable range. So if you look at a survey and it says 58% men, there's not a whole lot of states in the U.S. where men represent more than 50%, and there's a whole lot of states where women represent a decent bit more than 50% of the turnout electorate. So I'm just giving that as an example of when you look at a survey, I always go to the demographic questions first before I read the poll, because I want to know, does this survey reflect or is it representative of the voters who are likely to turn out in this election? And if it's too Republican or too Democratic or too old or too young, then I immediately know the rest of the survey is not worth looking at. And the exit polls, especially in states like Georgia, are a good gauge to look at and say, okay, well, what, in 2020, what was this breakdown of bipartisanship or by age or by gender or by race and just look at kind of the key demographic aspects of voters, and then does this poll match that or not? So that's the first thing is, start at the bottom of the poll, not the top of the poll. Mm-hmm. And then if it looks correct, you just got to trust that there's not a lot of waiting where if they needed, 5 independent females under the age of 30 in the northern arc of Atlanta, as an example, but they only got 2. Waiting is when you say, okay, well, I'm going to take that 2 and multiply it up to 5. And so that causes challenges within the survey, usually under the hood, not at the top line report level. But is you start with the demographics and then go back and look at the rest of the poll and determine, is this an outlier or not? Like, does this pass the smell test? Mm-hmm. And then the biggest thing that I believe voters, or just people who are paying attention to politics, listeners of the show, need to look at is, okay, who's undecided? Because one problem the Republicans had in 2022 is whatever the ballot share was on a ballot test of who you're going to vote for, Republican so-and-so or Democrat so-and-so, it was very, very challenging for Republicans to get above that ballot share, because when you looked at who the undecideds were and you looked at who they voted for in the presidential race 2 years before, these were like overwhelming Biden instead of Trump voters. Mm-hmm. And so that's the other aspect to look at is, okay, well, this looks good on net margin. The Republicans up by 6, but they're only at 43. Who are the undecideds? Oh, look, it's a bunch of highly educated single women under the age of 40. Well, those people are not voting Republican.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm glad you bring up exit polling, because I've regularly told listeners that you got to make sure you distinguish between the opinion poll and the exit poll. That to this day, I kind of think that the exit polling is still something we can look at and glean a lot of information from fairly accurately, as opposed to just the run-of-the-mill opinion polling that's out there.
Yes, and I don't look at exit polling until weeks after the election is over.
Right.
Simply because they do a lot of work on the back end after the polls close, and so they tend to be wonky, for lack of a better word, on election day themselves, but they're actually pretty decent after the fact. Mm-hmm. To look at. And so that's another, how to be a good consumer of polling is to don't pay attention to the exit poll until well after the election's done.
Right. Yeah, especially don't pay attention to them in the afternoon on election day when they start leaking.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So now, how do you guys at Signal conduct your polling, and your thoughts on online polling?
So I'll answer the first part of that of how we conduct it, and we take a all the above strategy, because if you were advertising your business, you wouldn't say, I'm just going to run radio ads or I'm just going to put something in the newspaper. You're going to do both, and then you're probably going to be on Facebook, and if you got money, you may go up on cable, and that's because there's no one medium in which you can reach everybody. Each medium of communication or advertising has strengths and weaknesses, and so when you combine them all together, you you play up the strengths and you mitigate the weaknesses. Those some weaknesses still exist, and then that way you're able to fill and make sure you speak to enough folks that are representative and look like who's going to turn out, instead of just call a bunch of landlines and know what every older person with a decent amount of time on their hands wants to tell you. And then to answer the online poll question, it has never been easier or cheaper or faster to do bad research through these online panels. That being said, you can do it well. It just takes a whole lot extra effort to ensure that you're not getting, the same 1,000 people that take 20 of those surveys a day in order to, get a free Chick-fil-A gift card once a week. And I'm grateful for folks who have signed up to take these surveys. But in order to get scale, it's tough to do if you just take all the low-hanging fruit. And it's a lot harder to conduct a good online survey, but it is possible to conduct a good online survey. And that, I guess, would be harder for somebody who's not familiar with the how polling operates, to even look at a set of reports from some public pollster putting out an online survey and know if it was low-hanging fruit or done the hard, good way.
Right. And so now I have this preconceived idea, and feel free to disabuse me of this, that because of the nature of online polling, that oftentimes you risk, particularly these public pollsters, of oversampling higher income people who tend to be more online, and so you can get a latent bias that way.
Definitely, because again, each mode of collecting survey responses has strengths and weaknesses, and one of online panel's strengths is that it is usually less expensive to get there, and there are actually a couple groups that are easier to get online than they are through a text message invitation or a phone call. But in and of itself, it can end up in the place where you're talking about, where you overrepresent certain types of populations that are more likely to participate in those forums. But all that being said, I'd rather have that as an imperfect approach to getting surveys more often than I would it not existing.
Well, that's good to know. All right. I am out of time, but this has been thoroughly educational. Brent Buchanan is with Signal. Brent, if people wanted to find out more about you guys, what's the website?
Yeah, great. We put a lot of our public polling that we do, even though that's a very small part of our business, on our website at cygn.al. So just cygn.al.
cygn.al. Brent, it is a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks very much for spending some time with me on this.
Hey, enjoyed it, Eric.
Absolutely. Brent Buchanan with Signal, one of the best pollsters in the country. Good people. Worked with Brian Kemp, a lot of other major people on the right, but they're also highly respected across the aisle. Democrats pay a lot of attention to what Signal publishes in their polling, because they have done a very good job of trying to figure out what's been wrong with polling and fix it. And they do a better job than a lot of others out there. Folks, I got to tell you about Old Glory Bank. Thinking of looking at what goes wrong and fixing it, Old Glory Bank has looked at other online banks and other banking institutions offline and decided they need to fix banking, and they have been so innovative. I love using Old Glory Bank. You will too. And you get no fee checking and no fee savings from them. And they are a real bank. Even if you never interact with a physical branch, you can still, for example, unlike a lot of other banks, including my old online bank, you can deposit cash at Old Glory Bank, and it works using their app. It's highly innovative. It generates a QR code. You go to 88,000 retail locations around the country. You drop off the cash, and it gets deposited in your bank account. I've used it now more than once, and it works. And they're by conservatives for conservatives, so they have a policy. They're not going to cancel your bank account if they see something they don't like. If it's legal, you're going to do it. Some big banks out there have started canceling bank accounts of people they disagree with. Old Glory Bank is not going to do that. They're a great conservative institution. OldGloryBank.com. You can get an account in less than 8 minutes online at OldGloryBank.com. OldGloryBank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. Well, Donald Trump has managed to troll the left. They are in meltdown mode. Again, by the way, I should note Bob Barr has won the NRA presidency, and Donald Trump spoke at the National Rifle Association and has trolled the left. Remember, he did that line where he was going to be dictator for a day, and what he meant was all the executive orders he was going to sign his first day, undoing the executive orders of the Biden administration. It was very clear in context. That's what he meant. Dictator for a day was just stroke of a pen, wipe out the Biden agenda that also had been done by executive order. Well, now he's managed to say this.
I don't know. Are we going to be considered 3-term or 2-term? You tell me. Ronnie, what do you think? Are we 3-term or 2-term if we win? But think of it. They're going to say, wonderful. Now, he did the State of the Union the other day. He was high as a kite.
The left's not upset about him saying Joe Biden was high as a kite. They're like, oh, see, he's going to hold power and he's never going to let it go. He's going to be a dictator. I have come to learn and accept that Donald Trump says these sorts of things to infuriate the left, and they will fixate on it. You're going to have Michael Beschloss on Morning Joe. Oh, Joe, he said if he gets the presidency, he's going to have a 3-term presidency, and that contradicts the Constitution. It's very clear Donald Trump intends to be a dictator, authoritarian, and democracy is under assault. Meanwhile, you've got them defending Joe Biden, saying he's ignoring the United States Supreme Court. That's not a dictator, no. He just knows how to do this. It really, like they're still hung up, particularly on MSNBC. They're hung up on Donald Trump saying he'd be dictator for a day. And then there's the Hannibal Lecter. It's very clear when he talked about Hannibal Lecter, he was talking about the crazy, insane asylum people that other countries are allowing into this country. It's very clear that it's not in dispute. And he praised Hannibal Lecter. He says he's going to be a dictator for a day. This is why nobody treats them seriously. And I think that's one of the things that the Trump team understands. When Donald Trump says stuff like this, it's not part of some sort of master 5D chess strategy. It's just baked into the equation, though, that people on the left are driven insane by the things he says. And then the Biden or the Trump team can totally discredit them by looking at their obsession with this sort of stuff. It was Selena Zito who one time said, Trump supporters don't take him literally, they take him seriously. And a lot of people have ridiculed her for that statement, and they've ridiculed that statement, but there is some truth there. When Donald Trump says we're going to be a 3-term presidency, he's not actually being literal about it. He knows he can't do it. The entirety of the American system of government would reject it. He would show up if he tried to run for re-election again, and the Secret Service wouldn't let him in the door. That's just the way our system works. And yet it so discredits the left when they scream and cry about this stuff. It allows Trump to continue to get away with things that he probably shouldn't, but he can because they distract themselves with the wrong things.